Welcome back, everybody, to our 2025 Global Summit, Spark Your Magic. We are joined by the absolutely fantastic Sharon Worth. Sharon, welcome to the stage. Our second session of our first day. Really wonderful to have you here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And if you are tuned in, please say hi. Don't be shy. Say hello to Sharon. We invite your comments, your questions. There is going to be a Q&A at the end, so we're going to keep the questions until the end of the session. So please do bring them in, and then Sharon will answer them at the end. And Sharon, today you're going to be talking to us about a whole new you, the power of menopause, and late discovered neurodiversity. If I've got your title correct there.
You have, yes.
Excellent. No, I'm really excited for this. No, it's really wonderful having you on board. I'm really looking forward to what you've got to bring. Now,
Thank you. Yeah, it's very much my own experience, my own story.
no,
Yeah.
wonderful. No, really looking forward to hearing that and for our audience to connect with that story that you're sharing. So we've got a couple of people tuned in, so I'm just going to say hi and I want to welcome you to introduce yourself a little bit. But we've got Adele tuned in. She's saying hello, and Positive Sharon will spark the magic with us all. I'm with you there, Adele. I'm sure she will. And Lila saying, I'm super ready and excited to learn from Sharon. So we've got people tuned in ready. Please don't be shy. I can see lots of people tuned in. So please feel free to share your comments and questions with Sharon. So Sharon, before I hand you the stage, would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am one of your level 5 students, loving the course. I chose to develop my coaching practice with Coaching Minds, which up until recently was more of a teaching and mentoring role, I guess, rather than coaching, purely due to the industry that I've been working in. Um, so I have a background in personal training. I also teach yoga, and I had taken a menopause coaching qualification and was working to support women through the menopause transition. This was very much based on my own experience, but that vocation grew and expanded into me studying hormones and neurodiversity. And I now support women of all ages, all neurotypes, have a special interest in late discovered neurodivergence and how female hormones can affect ADHD and autism traits. For many women, these shifts tend to bring really big questions. You get really big questions anyway when you sort of hit menopause, and as we learned in the last presentation, as we grow older, we start to question more. We start to seek the answers more. Um, and yes, some of those questions are around identity and just managing daily life in a way that feels more manageable and more authentic. So yeah, that's generally what I'm going to be looking at, and just telling you a little bit about my own experience.
No, wonderful.
And
Really, really.
of course, I've missed the main point. And of course, how coaching helps, how it's helped me.
Yeah. No, excellent. No, really, really looking forward to it. Really excited for it. And Sharon, I've seen your work on Instagram. You do some fantastic work for what you shared there. I really, really appreciate you helping and supporting others. It's really wonderful. I know you've not been with us very long. You've been with us for about 5, 6 months now, I think, at coaching.
January I started. Yeah.
So a little bit longer, so 8 months. Yep. No, excellent. No, and it's wonderful to have you for your first time here at our global summit. So on that note, I'm going to hand you the stage, and looking forward to listening to what you've got in store for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So actually, probably a good place for me to start is just to ask if there is anyone who's watching live who is experiencing or perhaps has experienced menopause, and anyone who might be diagnosed or identifies as neurodivergent. That will help me in how we move through the presentation in terms of any questions that I might ask. So if you're comfortable, please just drop a note in the chat. Okay, I will start to move through the presentation. Okay, I can see a couple of comments coming in, so that's useful. Thank you. Right, this is a photo of me. This is where I start. So this is a photo of me October last year, so coming up for a year ago now. And I think it's fair to say I look pretty happy. I'm now 52. I'm post-menopause and absolutely loving life. I'm feeling mostly content, mostly positive, but that wasn't always the case. As a child, I was described as little Dolly Daydream. I was lost in my imagination. I was struggling with school, with anxiety, and not quite fitting in. I battled learning differences, social confusion, and rebellion as a teen. And then I felt very misunderstood in my work life and often overwhelmed. It wasn't until much, much later that I was diagnosed with ADHD at 49 and autistic at 51. And that's really when the pieces started to fall into place, and I was finally able to understand myself and reshape my future. So I'd like to talk to you today about both menopause and late discovered neurodiversity and how they link up, because I believe that it was my experience of the menopause transition that led me to uncover my neurodiversity. I'd also like to talk about how coaching can be a really powerful resource in walking this path with its many obstacles along the way. So if you happen to be experiencing midlife right now and you feel comfortable popping it into the chat, perhaps pick one word to describe how you feel about it. No wrong answers, just an honest word about how you feel about midlife. I just mentioned briefly that when I say women or girls, I want to be clear that I fully recognise menopause can affect anyone with ovaries. So my intention is never to offend or exclude, and I use these terms simply for ease and flow in my speaking. So a little bit about menopause. I say a bit as the topic is much more out there today than it was several years ago. More and more people are talking about it, which is great because the impact that it has on society is huge. Up to a third of the female population in the UK will be going through menopause at any one time. And it not only affects each individual person assigned female at birth, it affects their families, relationships, their ability to work or continue working. And for many, doubt starts to creep in, questions arise, often around identity. For the majority of us, menopause also arrives at a time in life when there are many other big challenges. We might be sandwiched between caring for elderly parents and our own children. And this is on top of around 80% of women, what can often be debilitating symptoms. So things like joint pain, insomnia, brain fog, just to name a few. And there's also the health risks, which many aren't even aware of. And if they are aware of them, there's this pressure to be keeping up with all the latest research to prevent these with the right diet and the right exercise. And of course, there's the question around, well, what is the right diet? What is the right kind of exercise? Am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? Am I doing more harm than good? It's a crazy time. So in midlife, menopause can be incredibly confusing. It can be overwhelming, and it can be really, really challenging to manage. And then we have neurodiversity. So just to clarify what neurodiversity is. It can be, it's simply the natural variation of how our human brains work. So it will include conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and more. It's not about being broken or disordered. It's about difference, essentially. So neurodivergent brains will process, respond to, and experience the world in ways that don't always fit the mold that society expects. And that is especially the case for women and girls. So, yes, it can be that neurodivergent people are more deeply affected by menopause. So I appreciate this slide might be a little bit small, a little bit difficult to read, but essentially this is the interesting part, because many menopause symptoms will mirror ADHD or autistic traits. So these lists on the left and the right, so we've got menopause on the left, neurodivergent traits on the right, they're by no means exhaustive. There are many more that could be added to each column, but you can see how many of them overlap. So things like brain fog, sensory overload, irritability, poor sleep. We have executive dysfunction, anxiety, loss of confidence. So lots and lots of crossovers there. So for some of us, menopause didn't just bring hot flushes, it brought a lot more and uncovered a whole new way of perhaps us learning to understand ourselves better. So if you think you might be neurodivergent, can you trace your differences or struggles back to childhood? Were you labelled sensitive, daydreamy, lazy, messy, loud, or shy? And did you feel like you didn't quite fit in, even if you couldn't explain why? So, for example, maybe you couldn't follow multi-step instructions, or you found noise overwhelming, or maybe you hyperfixated on something you loved, but couldn't necessarily focus on anything else. And then you might ask yourself the question, if I was born this way, why didn't I discover this in myself before now? So I'd invite you to have a little think about that. And if anyone wants to pop any ideas in the chat, feel free. Just considering why this never cropped up before, which is actually one of my own questions that I asked when I was diagnosed, particularly as a mum of 3 neurodivergent children. So the one word that stands out for me is actually masking. Sorry, I've jumped ahead too far there. Yeah, masking. So many women become experts at hiding. So we learn to fit in, we learn to people please, smile through the confusion, and laugh off overwhelm. And we perform what we think is expected. So we're very good at copying others. So I remember as a girl copying the way people spoke, the way people moved, the way they dressed, even handwriting. I copied as well, because I just wanted to appear normal. Therefore, many of us will study how to be normal, or whatever normal is, sorry. And it works until it doesn't. And I will actually come to that in a later slide. So without overthinking, I invite you just to jot down one situation, whether you're male, female, neurodivergent, or neurotypical, one situation in which you feel you have to mask and hide your true self. just think about whether there was an emotional cost attached to it, because we all do it. We all do it in certain situations. So have a little think about that. And then I'll move on to the gender bias that does still exist today. So there's a huge gender bias when it comes to ADHD and autism assessments. The criteria that is still used today is mostly, or was mostly, developed based on how boys present. So not always, but often boys are more outwardly hyperactive or disruptive, and that is generally due to the way we're conditioned as we're growing up. So what happens is that many girls will internalize their struggles, and as I talked about earlier, they mask, they fawn, they people please, and they're often praised for being quiet or well behaved or easygoing, but all the while whilst sort of silently struggling. So because of this, so many girls are either misdiagnosed with things like anxiety or depression, or missed altogether. This is my attempt at a facial expression or a facial reaction to this kind of comment. You don't look autistic. It's quite a common one. And even as adults, women are still often not believed when we say, I think I might be autistic, or I think I might have ADHD. We're told that we're just hormonal or emotional or dramatic, or just trying to put a label on things, when in reality we've probably spent our whole lives adapting, masking, and burning out behind the scenes. There's still so many misconceptions about ADHD and autism. And too often people's understanding comes from outdated stereotypes. So in reality, neurodivergence is incredibly diverse. No two people experience it the same way. And as an example, which some of you may have heard me share before, back in May, I met some ladies on a paddleboarding safari in Greece when I was on holiday. And we're all of a similar age, and we stopped off at a lovely bay for a coffee before we paddled our way back to our resort. And the conversation turned, as it often does, to work. And when I explained what I do and talked about my own late diagnosis, I was met with, but you're not socially awkward and you can make eye contact, so you can't be autistic. And the truth is that both of these things I've learned to try and perfect throughout my years of masking. So yeah, that can be quite a hurtful and often invalidating comment, particularly for women and particularly for those who are diagnosed later in life. The consequences of lifelong masking. So eventually the cracks show. I mentioned earlier that masking works until it doesn't. So this can happen for many reasons, but a very common one is when we reach perimenopause and our estrogen levels start to drop. So it's actually estrogen whose role it has been to help us mask. It's that estrogen dropping that unmasks all these difficulties, and we just don't have the capacity to keep on masking. So our struggles were always there, and we probably noticed them more during our luteal phase or the premenstrual phase. But probably just as much as anyone else, we put them down to is probably just PMT. So now you can start to see the gender bias more clearly. So we're talking linear versus cyclical traits and symptoms, and all heavily influenced by our biochemistry. And of course, when menopause hits, the ability to keep on masking really just vanishes. So if there is anyone here or anyone watching who has just discovered neurodivergence, or perhaps you think you might be. What you actually deserve is a big round of applause and a rest, a proper unapologetic rest. So it's really important that you give yourself some space and start to ask all the questions. Consider your next steps. For me, this involved lots and lots of reflection. It involved discussion with friends and family, lots and lots of crying, an element of doubt, some light bulb moments, therapy and coaching, and lots and lots of research, particularly into female presentation of both ADHD and autism. So I read books, I listened to podcasts, I followed women who were sharing their own journeys of self-discovery. Diagnosis doesn't necessarily provide all the answers. These are there for you to discover for yourself by starting to ask the right questions. So you'll start to make sense of your past, and you will go through a grievance process. So you'll grieve for your younger self. You might experience doubt, anger, fear, shame, and also a deep sadness, which was my experience, certainly for the first few months following diagnosis. Now, one thing that bothers me, and I think is what affected me so deeply, is that neurodivergence can be framed as a disorder. So whether it's ADHD, autism, dyslexia, or any other neurodivergent condition, it's framed as a disorder. Almost like neurodivergent people are less than or in some way broken or not good enough. And that's where the shame can come in and the embarrassment can come in. But more often, it's the opposite that's true. It's neurodivergent brains that learn to challenge some of society's absurdities, for example, to sort of question more creatively and think more deeply. So, options. You do have options. You could do nothing, because none of us really needs a label to define us. You could do something in that you might feel that you need a diagnosis, perhaps for validation, for absolute certainty, because we all doubt ourselves. Or if you do suspect that you have ADHD, it might be that you would like to trial medication. And of course, you can't trial medication without a formal diagnosis. A little word on HRT, hormone replacement therapy. If it's an option, it can help if you are menopausal or going through the menopause transition. So I mentioned earlier how estrogen helps us to mask. And I could talk for hours on how hormones affect neurodivergence, but that's something I'll say for another time. HRT can help by replacing the hormones we're losing or have lost, depending on what stage of the menopause transition we're at. So whilst it isn't for everyone, for those who can take it and choose to take it, it can be very effective. And I would also mention here as well that if you do have ADHD and perhaps you're already diagnosed and already taking medication, this might need reviewing as well. It's very individual, and what might have worked for you in the past may need adjusting to what will become your new normal once you've gone through menopause. So a quick question for you. If you discovered you might be neurodivergent, which camp do you think you would be in? Do you think you would be in do nothing camp, or do you think you would seek out a diagnosis? Just something to think about. So how we advocate for ourselves is important. We're all different, whether we're neurotypical or otherwise, and very few of us have ever learned really how to be authentic. which is one thing I love about coaching. So we've often learned or been taught to conform to societal norms or expectations, but now could be your opportunity to start being your authentic self and starting to discover who you really are. So another little suggestion here is to think about one small way that you could advocate for yourself this week, even if it is just saying no to something. Okay, so how can coaching help? I'll share my own experience here. So after I was diagnosed, coaching helped me unpick everything I believed about myself. It gave me space to make sense of my diagnoses, to discover my true values, because a coach that I worked with took me through the values model. It helped me figure out what I actually liked and disliked, and it turns out that I didn't like a lot of the things that I'd forced myself to do for years. It helped me to understand my past behaviours, and for the first time, it helped me to see a really clear path ahead. So, because of my own experience, my passion now is very much helping women in a very similar situation. And I had a really lovely review left for me by one of my clients, and I just think that it really sort of highlighted how beautifully, well, it just sort of captures how, as coaches, we can really challenge a client's thinking and help them to see their world from a fresh perspective. And I think I know what this client was referring to actually in her review, because she had just had her diagnosis the morning of our coaching session, and she was disappointed and she was doubting it and she felt angry. So she was kind of going through this grieving process that I spoke about earlier. And she was very, very upset. And the question I asked was, how would you feel now if you had found out this morning that you didn't have ADHD? And it really, really took her by surprise, and she realised that actually she would have been absolutely gutted, and that actually she was pleased and she was relieved. It was just this huge emotional turmoil that she was going through when you receive that kind of diagnosis so late in life, and you start to reflect back on all your difficulties and how life could have been different, I guess, if you'd had that neurodivergence identified earlier in life. So a little bit about what coaching means to me, really. So at this stage in my own coaching practice and my own self-development, coaching just means so many things. And I asked myself this question when I was preparing these slides, and I very much had a bit of a brain dump, really. And this is what came up and what I wrote down. So I keep a journal, and in my journal, I wrote down that I felt that coaching was a gift, a skill, and very much a self-development journey of curiosity. So for me, it ties in very, very nicely with the curiosity that arrives in menopause and arrives with a late diagnosis of neurodiversity. And I say a skill because I'm learning it can be a very difficult skill to master, and requires lots and lots of practice. So I'm very grateful to the journey that I'm on with Coaching Minds and the level 5 content that I'm working through right now. these are some of the words that came up when I thought about what coaching is from both perspectives, actually, as a coachee and as a coach. So challenging, deep listening is a huge thing that I'm really starting to enjoy practicing, and I'm really enjoying reading the book Time to Think at the moment. But it's just such a precious space. Where else in life do you get to sit and be listened to so deeply, if not in a coaching session or maybe a therapy session or counselling session as well? But the power of silence is just huge, and I'm beginning to learn that, and I'm really, really enjoying practicing emergence coaching as well. So yeah, a few more words there that I wrote down, and then a few more. I thought about what it really means to me. So it's exciting. And actually, it can terrify me as well. I guess from both perspectives. As a coachee, I'm being probably pushed and tested and challenged, maybe outside of my comfort zone. And I suppose because I'm quite early on in my transformational coaching journey, I worry that I'm not going to get it right. I worry that I'm going to mess things up. But again, the support from Coaching Minds is there, the regular supervision, the fact that I can reach out to Paul or Adele at any time with any queries or concerns is just so reassuring. So I'm still learning, I'm still building confidence. It's fair to say that I get a real buzz from coaching. So that's the sort of energizing, exciting part of it, the freeing part of it. But I also know that it can really tire me. So as a coach, I do know to space my clients out. And at the moment, I would never have more than 2 clients in one day, because that is absolutely enough for me at this current time. So this isn't just being kind to myself, it's also ensuring that I show up with 100% presence for my clients. So in terms of coaching, in terms of both a coach and a coachee, how it's helped me, it's multifaceted, really. I mean, all of my recent experiences have helped me on my own journey of self-discovery, of authenticity, and viewing life through this new lens, through this new discovery lens. So it enables me to help others to do the same as well, and that it feels really, really wholesome. That's probably the best word I can use to describe it. So I feel like I'm really part of a movement. It's through open, curious, and compassionate questions asked with just the right touch of empathy, and often with a period of intuitive silence, that all people, neurodivergent or otherwise, can just find the space to truly feel and name their emotions, to quietly reflect. And this quiet reflection nurtures self-trust, self-compassion, and intuition. It opens our eyes and empowers us to take action, to have courage. Coaching gives us the gift of time to recognize who we really are, and can provide a very powerful sense of purpose. And for me, it's often about questioning the way we do things, what society expects, how our thinking has been shaped, and how our thinking can evolve. Ultimately, coaching shows us that it's perfectly okay to be different, to ask for help, to be gentle with ourselves, and to trust in our intuition, to trust that gut. And above all, to really love and to value ourselves. So without working with some amazing coaches myself, I would likely still be stuck in my old life, feeling trapped, confused, and quite frankly exhausted with the effort of getting through each day, because at one stage that's very much what it felt like. So I would invite you to go away today and think about what coaching means to you and what you value about it. So that brings me to the end. Thank you very much for listening. And if you do happen to be interested in having a chat with me, like most coaches, I offer a free 30-minute discovery call. That is my website. I'm currently going through rebranding because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm now sort of moving beyond just menopause and female well-being in general. So I'm currently transitioning to my new domain name, Sharon Worth Coaching. But yeah, that is me. And I invite any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I was just putting your website into the chat, so that should be hitting the feed for people to click. So that's in there. But no, thank you so much for a wonderful session. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else appreciates it. But I also want to say a huge thank you for not just sharing your own story, but creating that space of psychological safety for members of the audience to share their story as well. We've had a few people share that they've been diagnosed with ADHD, autism, they're going through menopause. So thank you, everybody in the audience that shared that. And this is a safe space for us to have these conversations. And thank you for leading this, Sharon, and bringing it forward. I really appreciate it. And there was lots of comments coming through, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with feeding them through the chats. But we did have a couple of questions. So I'm going to start with a question from Adele, which goes back to the slide you're talking in terms of masking. And Adele's asked you, how, as a coach, do you help somebody that is masking?
That's an interesting question, and I think it really varies from person to person, but usually if somebody is neurodivergent or they're struggling with something, it can be through a lot of open questioning, really, as you would expect, to help them unpick the reasons why. You know, why are you masking? Why is it difficult for you to show up authentically in this situation? And really helping clients to unpick when it is perhaps necessary to mask. So although I hate the idea of masking, in certain situations it might be safer to mask, it might be more appropriate to mask. And I think a lot of it will come into boundaries as well. So if somebody is feeling particularly uncomfortable in a certain situation where they feel they can't be themselves, what can they do about it?
Yeah, good question.
And it might be that they remove themselves. It might be that they discover that actually I don't have to do that. You know, that was one of my experiences, that, you know, I realized that I didn't like some of the things that I was forcing myself to do because I thought I had to. But actually, I never took the time or the space to consider until I was challenged by a coach. So why not? Why, you know? So maybe don't go. Yeah, you know, actually thinking that, well, do I really need to be there? So yeah, I don't know whether that answers the question, Adele. I hope that in some way helps.
And I really love that, Sharon, because it's not a case of, right, you've got to stop masking and we're telling the clients they need to stop masking, we're finding ways to do it. You're actually unpicking, you know, what's going on, what's the situation, what's the context, and you're asking questions around that to see what's best for the client, which demonstrates great, fantastic coaching skills. And I really loved how you defined coaching throughout your presentation as well, and the keywords that you put on the screen. It was really wonderful to witness. So So excellent. If you do have any questions, please feed them into the chat. Now is the time to ask Sharon your questions. We've got another one for Adele. Adele's very active with her questions today. So she says, how can a person that decided to do nothing be guided?
It's another good question. In the same way that you would guide anyone, I guess. If somebody's feeling slightly lost and not really knowing who they are, then I think that's when some of the tools will come in. So, for example, the values pyramid that you use in Coaching Minds can be really, really useful in uncovering who you are. You know, what's really important to you, and then focusing on that, and then does your life align with those values or not? And if not, where do what are your next steps?
Excellent. I think the values pyramid is a really good tool to start with. And it's almost going back to what we talk about in Coaching Minds a lot in coaching is the psychological contracting as well. Where are we at with that psychological? Do you know how much the client know or aware of what they want and how to get there as well? Because, the whole action and taking action and moving forward only becomes part of our coaching when we're in that behavioral contract state of psychological contract. And so now, thank you for sharing that, and a really good question, Adele. And please do ask your questions. So while we wait for more questions to come in, I do have a question of my own, Sharon. And one thing I don't believe you touched upon in your session today is, how can people around you or people around people who have menopause or are neurodivergent, what's the best way for them to support you going through this journey?
Again, I think it's very individual. We all have a very unique experience of menopause and neurodiversity, and I think it comes back to being able to self-advocate. So, and comes back to that responsibility that we heard about in the last session. So, taking responsibility to communicate to your loved ones, family, friends, colleagues, advocating for yourself at work, making requests for those reasonable adjustments, whether it's menopause or neurodiversity or both. It very much sits with you, because people aren't mind readers. Having said that, there are probably lots of people battling through menopause and neurodivergence, not even knowing that they're in menopause or that they might be neurodivergent. So therefore, how do you self-advocate for yourself in those situations? So in terms of how you could support somebody who might be going through menopause or neurodivergent, it comes down to awareness, I guess. So there is more awareness, as I said earlier, there's more awareness of both menopause and neurodivergence in society now. So I think it's just not assuming, certainly not judging, but just quietly considering there's something going on there, and this person deserves some time, some patience, some love, some compassion, just as we would like to be treating other human beings. It's almost irrelevant, because we're all usually going through something at some point. Sorry, that sounded very dismissive. It's not irrelevant, but what I'm trying to say is we're too quick to judge, aren't we? I think that if you come across, I don't know, you go into Sainsbury's and the person on the till is just really rude and grumpy and not very helpful. It's taking that pause and thinking they're probably going through something, so I'm not going to react. I'm perhaps just going to be pleasant and not add fuel to the fire.
No, thank you for responding. That's a beautiful response. I really appreciate it. I really like the part you said about awareness as well. And this is what you're doing today, and that I see you do a lot, is to spread that awareness. So, it's really beautiful to see. So thank you for sharing that, Sharon. And we got another question come in from Cindy. So Cindy says, can you please share a little about parenting children with neurodiversity with the awareness of your own neurodiversity?
I'm not sure I entirely understand that question. So, I mean, I'm a mum of 3 neurodivergent children, and I parented them thinking I was a neurotypical parent. So it was a lot later that I discovered that I was also neurodivergent, and then questioning, why did I not realize this before? Bearing in mind I have 3 children with these difficulties, but I'm struggling to answer that one because I'm not entirely sure of the context. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Not an issue at all, Sharon. And Cindy, if there's any clarification you want to put off the back of that, please do. We've got another question from Catriona, who's joined in today. And it's wonderful to see you, Catriona, as well. Thank you for being here, and everybody else who's tuned in. Catriona says, thank you. This was a really excellent talk. Do you have any recommended reading for autism and menopause?
At this moment, I'm not aware of any books that cover neurodiversity and menopause. And it might be a little bit premature to mention that I'm currently writing one. So watch this space. Lots of really good books on menopause that I'm aware of, and autism separately. And probably the 2 biggest ones I would recommend for menopause, I recommend it to everyone, is The Menopause Brain by Dr. Lisa Mosconi. So she's a neuroscientist, a women's neuroscientist. And hands down, I've read a lot of menopause books, and that is absolutely the best one. Very, very reassuring, very educational, very easy to understand, bearing in mind she's a neuroscientist. And a couple of really good books that I've read on autism. Gosh, I've got to try and pull them from my brain now, which is a challenge. Bearing in mind I have a menopause brain. Can I send them through to you later, Paul?
And you can do, and we'll put them in the comments. In the hub.
Yeah, there's one guy who I absolutely love. Actually, I've got his book in front of me here. It's Kieran Rose, and he's written a book called Autistic Masking, and that's a really good book. But there are a couple of others as well. But in particular, I found a book called, I can't remember who it's by, but it's called What I Mean When I Say I'm Autistic. It's a very short read, which is great for someone with ADHD, but written by a female. And it was by reading that book that I thought, following my ADHD diagnosis, ooh, okay, I think it might be autism too. It was really useful because, as I said earlier, you know, male and female presentations are very different. That was a really, really good book, I would say, for women in particular.
Excellent. No, thank you for sharing those, Sharon. I was typing them in and feed them into the chat as you mentioned them. So but we'll capture the full list that you have afterwards, and we can post them in the comments.
Thank you.
No worries. So lots of comments coming through here. So Joyce Roy saying, I agree with you, Sharon. It's always health to avoid judging others. And Catriona also saying, also, if you feel like your client may be experiencing problems due to menopause, but they haven't brought it up, can you suggest any questions that would help to identify whether that is impacting on them? That's a really good question.
It is. I've been doing some work with the Samaritans recently, actually, around that, because they will have callers from women who will be in quite a challenging situation, or you know, with poor mental health, with anxiety, with depression, and it can be likely that they're in menopause but not know it. So a lot of women will start their menopause transition around sort of mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s. It's the average age for menopause in the UK is 51, but the transition can take 10 years. And obviously 51 is just an average, so you can imagine that you could actually start experiencing some of these changes in the brain that can create anxiety and depression and low mood in your mid-30s, mid to late 30s. So I think there is this common misconception that menopause happens in your 50s. And so many women will arrive in perimenopause and not know that they're there. So hence I'm doing this work with the Samaritans around how they might ask those questions. And it's really, really tricky. It really is. And I think for me, rightly or wrongly, it would have to be quite direct. I don't know how subtle you can be. Have you considered that it might be something hormonal going on for you? Have you noticed any changes to your monthly cycle, for example? Because that's one of the first sort of indicators. Have you noticed any other symptoms alongside this low mood or this anxiety, for example, any physical symptoms? Because I mentioned earlier, joint pain. Joint pain is a very common one that comes up quite early. So I don't know how subtle you can be, but yeah, they're just a few suggestions.
No, it's a really good question, and it's a really good questions you fired back there, Sharon, as well, because our role as a coach is to always ask questions without judgment, and there's a risk that we can bring in our own assumptions there on a judgment if we're not careful with the questions that we ask. And I really like the questions you're asking about the the physical symptoms of the body, and that the wide-end question. I'm just thinking of, if I was a coach in this situation, what would I ask if there was an intuition there? Not that I work with menopause or neurodivergent clients, but it would be just to explore the physiology of what's going on for the individual, and then see what leads from there. So it's a really good question, and it's one that we can all take a bit way back as coaches and reflect upon. How would we act in that situation? What questions would we bring in? So, and thank you for the statement on that.
See, I have a question for you there, Paul.
Yeah.
So by asking those kind of questions, is that not considered kind of directive?
Not really, because if you think back, one of the models we tend to use a lot, especially when we look at the psychological models of cognitive behavioral coaching, we look at the space model, which is not just to look at what's being said and the feelings, but also what's going on for the body with the client, with what they're going through. So it's not directed to explore the body. Being directed would say, do you think this is linked to menopause?
Okay.
That is directed because you make an assumption, but exploring what's going on for them in their physiology, in their body. Do you know what's happening with you in terms of your physical health? Has this, what you're going through right now, had an impact on your physical health? The good question you asked with about the have you had any changes in your monthly cycle is another one, that you're exploring what's going on without leading. You're just trying to get as much information as you can from that space. So yeah, but really good question, Katrin. It's got us reflecting. It's got us having a good discussion about coaching, which is what we're here to do. So I'm going to go back because we've got 7 minutes, which is great. We're still on time. We're going to go see if there's any more questions. So Jane is saying that is really powerful, having the mindset that everyone is going through something, the link between reacting versus responding. Yeah, and I really love when you said that. Sharon, that's something I work on, because if I'm in a bit of a bad mood and I'm going to Sainsbury's or Tesco or whatever, and you get that person that's just really rude with you, it takes a lot for me at times just to step back and say, you don't need to be behaving this way. But it's about being that compassionate and kind person, and understanding and remembering they must be going through something, or they could be going through something right now. Let's have a look. So Cindy's come back to clarify, I think. So, sorry, my brain. I meant if there were any strategies that you found helpful parent and neurodivergent children.
Ooh, gosh, loads. And again, I'm going to mention individuality, because one thing that really frustrated me when my children only attended school for a short period of time because it actually was just too much for them, and actually they came out of school and received very alternative education. But one of the things that used to frustrate me is hearing from school staff that, you know, they understand how to manage X, Y, and Z. You know, oh yes, we know how to deal with an autistic child. Is that individuality again? So I think it's very much listening to your child and very much giving them space, allow them to express themselves. I guess it depends on what's going on for your children. But if, for example, you know, a classic would be that a child's holding it together all day in school, and they come home and they will just go off like a volcano because they're in their safe space and they feel safe to unravel and to release all that emotion that's been sort of held up all day in school. It's very much giving them space. It's knowing when to back off. It's very much picking your battles. And one question that I learned to ask is, how important is this? So, for example, to give you a very real example, I used to try and insist that the children sat at the table to eat with us. Because that's what you do, because that's what we, you know, that's how I was brought up. But actually, it was just very, very difficult for one of them in particular. So it's pick your battles. And for that particular child, it was far more comfortable for him to take his meal away and to eat on his own. It was too much for him to sit at a dinner table with other people. He can do it now as an adult. So it's little things like that. And again, depending on the age of the child, you very much have to be their advocate. You have to advocate for them within the education system. You know, I have experience of having sat through 2 tribunals to try and get the right sort of help that the children needed. So yeah, loads I could offer, and very happy to have a chat with you, Cindy. You know, hop on a call and have a chat if you've got anything specifically that you want to explore. Be more than happy to help.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much for that, Sharon. And I'm also going to bring in a comment from Catriona as well, who's given a little bit of response to Cindy's question. So Catriona is another one of our coaches here at Coaching Minds who also works with neurodivergence as well. And she's put, though I'm not a parent myself, I've coached a few neurodivergent parents. What I see working really well is growing awareness of a parent's own regulatory needs that models to children. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I mean, we can be such good role models to all the people around us, but particularly for our children, in terms of how we self-regulate, how we manage our own emotions. Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
Excellent. Well, Sharon, there's no more questions in the comments box right now. There's a few more comments coming through, but we're coming up to the hour. So I just want to say again a huge, huge thank you, Sharon, for creating the space, for being so open, for being so, you know, there's a lot of education in this as well, and also for sharing. I'm going to share your website one last time so people could reach out to you. Let me just find this. So you can contact and reach out to Sharon at www.themenocoach.com. It's on the screen right now. Sharon, thank you so much for a wonderful session, a beautiful session, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in and engaged with Sharon. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to seeing everybody in our final session of the day in an hour's time, where we're going to be connecting with Ed Stanley to look at moving from inner critic to inner coach. So thank you, Sharon. Beautiful session. Really, really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll be there for the next session as well.
Excellent. I'll see you there. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you so much, everybody. Speak soon. Thanks.